Woo, Ryan, we got to take care of a little business before we get into this episode. This very good, exciting episode with the wonderful Jim Perry. So, if you are listening to this today, you are going to hear Jim and us talk about his company, DEFY Wrestling. And guess what? On our Patreon right now, you can go, if you're a subscriber, and listen to our commentary for their first ever main event, Cody Rhodes against Swerve Strickland from 2017. It is an awesome match. We literally just watched it. It's so much fun. What DEFY Wrestling is doing is a blast, so go check that out. And then on Friday, because we know we've been a little light on the current WWE news right now, we will be dropping our SummerSlam predictions as a mini episode on Friday, so you can listen to those predictions. So right now, Patreon, DEFY match, Swerve Strickland, Cody Rhodes. Friday, SummerSlam predictions. And for now, I think we can just talk to Jim Perry, right?
Let's go talk to Jim, man. Let's learn more about DEFY Wrestling.
The following podcast is scheduled for one recording with no time limit. Making their way down to somewhere in the ring, Andrew Sanford and Ryan Sprague.
Let the people in, I guess.
Come in, guys. Come on in. Come down the ramp with us. Don't be scared. Welcome, everyone, to Somewhere in the Ring. I guess we're just gonna start. Why not, guys?
Let's dive in. This is a podcast where we talk about wrestling, usually WWE stuff. I mean, this time we are branching out for our own betterment, which is very exciting. And we have Jim Perry with us here. Jim, hi.
Hey guys. I'm so excited to be on this show with you. Right before you hit record, I was waxing poetic, I think, and I was reminiscing, and I was, really being in this moment of being with two guys that I've known for a very long time. Ryan for like 10 or 12 years, most typically in relationship to the UFO and paranormal phenomenons and talking about those. And in podcasting in general, though, not to toot our own horn, but I don't give a shit. We have been doing this for a very long time.
I was about to say that. I toot away, baby. Like, it's fine. So you are allowed. Cool. You are allowed.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's I put myself over and you over, and I'll start using some terminology.
Yes, we're going to bust out the wrestling lingo. That's for sure. But Jim, you bring up so many good points. So why don't we start there for our wrestling audience who might not be too familiar with your work in the paranormal space or my work in the UFO space. Let's kind of go into the origins, I guess, of when we first kind of connected. And man, like you said, we're going back 10, 12 years. At this point, where I think I started listening to your show, and then like you had me on your show, and I still remember being so nervous and like rehearsing what I was going to say in the mirror as if I were auditioning for like a Broadway show, man.
That
So
that doesn't sound like you, Ryan. Are you
Not
sure
at all.
That was?
I don't pre-plan anything. Yeah. Just ask Andrew when I give him a 12-page outline for an interview.
That happened once, maybe twice. It's totally fine. But yeah, fill me in, you two fellas, because I met Jim through Ryan on like Facebook when it was still a nice place to be. And so how did you two? So podcast stuff, paranormal stuff, UFO stuff. What was the real common ground that brought you two together? Do you remember if there was like a specific case, anything like that?
I think it was just that at that point in time when I decided to start my podcast Euphomet, which at that time was just an interview show mixed with some radio stories and documentary stuff. I was experimenting a lot. I was listening to other shows in that space. There were not a ton of paranormal podcasts at that point in time. I mean, ones that were of note, and they were certainly not many at all that had younger people at that time doing them. They were all a little bit more of the veterans in the space, I should say. I was trying to like
coast to coast, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Jim and I were the young ones back then. I was probably the youngest UFO researcher like on the scene at that point. Not
I'm
anymore, which is depressing as hell. But it was a badge of honor back when we first started, right, Jim?
Yeah, we really connected over our age, and it was through Ryan at that time was doing a show with Shannon LeGros called Into the Fray,
Right.
And with a co-host Sam Sheeran as well, who's a fantastic artist, a visual artist, and we connect just over like, oh wow, we're like we're pretty grounded, well-adjusted people. We hope to be able to enter this space with artful intention. Right. Wow. We have found our people together. And that felt really good. And that was very empowering. And for those starting years of getting into this space, being able to share information about like, hey, what mic are you using? What platform are you going on?
Sure.
How do you get ads? Like all these different things that we were able to just create a little community around and support each other. And we brought over those years, those origin years, we brought other people in and helped develop other things. And then, Somewhere in the Skies was developed by Ryan, and really took off and was like such a great expression of his relationship to the phenomenon and his deep investigation into those things, while also being a writer and theatrically minded. So you got to see him like really spread his wings in that way. And then we just guested on each other's shows and kept in contact. And I did a feature on Ryan once Euphomet was a full-fledged documentary program.
Sure. So, right. You came all the way to New York and we did a filming. We were on my roof in Queens. Dude, that was like probably one of the most memorable experiences of my life. Like talk about being nervous. When a film crew is like traveling to you, there's a lot of expected of you. Sure. So, I like rented out a theater that we could go into. So it looked all theatrical, like you said. To really try to, I guess, capture that side of me, a playwright, which a lot of the people in the UFO space weren't really familiar with my work as an artist in New York at the time. They just knew me as, the UFO guy. So I was so honored that you decided to like highlight that aspect of my life and how it kind of bled over into the UFO world. And Jim, that's what I've always appreciated about what you do, the way you storytell and capture these people's voices. Like, tell us a little maybe about Euphomet and you traveling all over the country. We're not talking like over, StreamYard or Zoom like we do these days. Like you were bouncing all across the country and really putting a microscope on people's lives who've had strange experiences. So maybe tell us a little about Euphomet.
Thank you. It's a show about the unknown and our relationship to it, and how I break that down and how I internalize that as kind of its manifesto and its descriptor is that it's about the humans within the paranormal equation. It's about how we relate to these things, how they change our lives, how our lives change it, and I feel there's a relationship that develops and through us and the unknown. And in that liminal space is a chance of great growth through trauma, through adversity, through life changes. And I had developed this great curiosity around what it would be like to embed myself with those people while they're going through these experiences. And if I could help them by sharing their story, add any bit of context to their own narrative, in which I would have hoped would translate to the audience in a sense that if they were experiencing something similar, they didn't feel alone anymore. And that started to occur. And it was just even more inspiring and created this sense of responsibility to help tell these stories in a way that was conducive to aggressive empathy is what I like to call it lately. Right. And along the way I was, doing ethnographic work, and I had no idea even what that was. I'm not an academic. I don't come from this from a scholarly point of view. I come from it with an empathetic philosophical point of view, probably. But along the way, traveling all over the country and traveling to different parts of the world for this work, you know, I have had the benefit of experiencing a lot of weird shit myself.
Sure.
From full apparitions, like Scooby-Doo style ghosts, to potential contact with unidentified craft, synchronicities and psychic messages. I've skirted death like a few times while in the field. Sometimes that hasn't been, certainly not paranormal in nature. But
can you tell us a little about that, if you're willing to share?
Yeah. Well, I almost recently got hit by a train.
Sorry.
That's the reaction we were looking for. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So
what?
This episode, it might be out by the time this comes out, or it'll come out soon in this next season, in the season of Euphomet that I just started 2 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
There's an adventure that I document with a local witch who was showing me the site where, when she was in high school, she would go and find safety to be able to start practicing witchcraft and develop these rituals. And she had to go to the outskirts of town to this giant train tunnel that was, in going into these giant train tunnels, there is a majesty to them and a mysteriousness. And in this one in particular, it's long enough and it's curved enough that when you go into the center of the tunnel, it's completely pitch black. It's the darkest place you can go, it seems like. And you're in a mountain. You're in the middle of a mountain at that point. And so it was 9 degrees out, snow everywhere, giant icicles hanging from the top of this thing. Looks like if it fell, it would impale you and you were done. And we were about to go into this tunnel, and I had looked over to the subject, who is Bex, who a lot of Euphomet listeners, if they're listening to this, will know from being on Night Drift and helping me with those things quite a bit over the last few years. I turned to Bex and I said, so this is like decommissioned, right? There's not trains in this tunnel. I understand it's like a mile long and we're going deep inside of it. It doesn't look like there's a lot of space to avoid the tracks. It's going to be okay, right? And she's like, I mean, I don't know if.
No. So, gentlemen, that's it. That's it for me. I'm going to just tap out of that.
Yeah. So this tunnel is notorious for ghost sightings as well, and obviously now I'm learning that witchcraft is done in it, and ritual magic, and so we go inside, and I've got my recorder, and we're taping in there and imbibing, and we get towards the middle of the tracks, and it's completely dark, and we're talking, and I'm losing track of sort of the space we're in a little bit. I do notice there's cutouts along the way in the wall, of the tunnel, so that, that's where you go if a train comes.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, that's helpful if we need those backs. And she goes, well, I don't know if they're helpful or not, because, when we were growing up, the teachers in high school and stuff would say, like, hey, don't go in those tunnels, because even if you get into those cutouts, like the suction from the train, it'll pull you out and underneath it. And then, a lot of these trains, like these aren't like Amtrak trains, right? Like these are, hauling industrial goods,
right,
and waste and oil and everything else. And so they have chains on them and stuff sticking out of them. And it's, you don't want to be around these things when they're going by, especially in confined circumstances. So we get to the end of the tunnel, all fine. All right, let's get out of here. We go back, head the other way, and then I feel a vibration in my chest. And I look behind me, and coming around the bend outside is the brightest light you could ever imagine, and it's a giant train. And I'm in that moment trying to pull my recorder out of my sling bag to try to start getting it on tape.
Oh,
and
hell yeah, dude.
to describe how fast that thing was coming and how little time I had, I couldn't even get it up fast enough to record.
Crazy.
I had to stop and jump and pull back into the cutout and narrowly escape getting ran over. And like, as it was happening, as it was about to like start to tear past us, and I was like holding, the sides of the wall as hard as I could only think, holy shit, are we going to get sucked out of this thing? Like, we got here. Oh my God. And Bex is yelling as loud as she can in my ears. And I'm holding and I'm like, oh no, no chains, no suction. And obviously we were not sucked into the train. I'm here talking to you today.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Or are you?
I was about to say,
baby.
or this just became it even more. Yeah.
Yes. You became one of the ghosts in the tunnel.
I also
That's
love
terrifying.
I love that she actively didn't try to like calm your fears or anything like that. It's like, oh no, yeah, it can get pretty bad if we're
it can get real bad. This is a bad idea. Let's do it.
Wild.
So those things happen during the course of Euphomet.
Sure.
More often than I'd like to admit, of me getting in situations where I'm out in the middle of nowhere with a complete stranger, or there's been a dozen times probably where I just like think to myself, like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, and like, it's not gonna stop either, unfortunately, because like the stories that I'm chasing now are even more dangerous than I've ever approached before. And now that I have this like sort of passport to go to a lot more places, being on SPECTREVISON radio, I'll be in Germany in a couple weeks. Cool. Chasing some stories and doing some producing of things, including some Euphomet, and just being stuck in the basement of a goth club at 3 a.m. just doesn't seem like it's out of the realm of possibility. And if this is my last interview.
And then all of a sudden blood starts coming out of the sprinklers.
Yeah.
Then Blade does show up, but he mistakes you for a vampire. So it's like that's
Wait, is that Steven Dorff in the corner? What's going on here?
Dude,
man.
Guys that are the characters designed for vampires are way too close to how I actually look. So I would be the first one gone.
Oh, stop.
Like, done.
I want to, if I may, very quickly, because I love what you were saying, Jim, about the empathetic nature of what you do. And it's something I've always admired Ryan for as well. And I've seen you do this, which is that, and I mean, you said this already, but you guys put humans first. And I think that's really important because it adds just a whole new layer to things. And it also allows you guys to be more investigative and be journalists and listen to people and really take things seriously. So just props to you both for doing that. And if I may offer a little pushback to something that was said earlier, I don't think it's depressing that you guys are not the young guns anymore, because I think even just peripherally, because I'm somewhere in the skies, listeners will know, and as anybody, I'm more of a skeptic myself. But even from the outside, you can see the passion that has started to take over younger folks in looking at this stuff. And at the very least, you guys were a part of that movement. You know what I mean? So that's exciting. That's cool stuff, So just that's all.
Thanks, man. Well, and the landscape has changed so much when it comes to the unknown and our relationship to it, as Jim would say. The UFO world itself has changed dramatically since Jim and I first started. I mean, it's gone mainstream. Yeah, the Pentagon is officially investigating UFOs. They've admitted they're real. But as Jim and I know, now the hard questions come. What are they? Where do they come from? What are the intention? What is the source behind it all?
What do you know, and when did you know it?
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yep. Jim, I'd like to know, rewinding a little bit, before we get to the new endeavors with SPECTREVISON and your relationship there. What got you into all of this? That's always like my first question for guests on any podcast I do. But what got you into the unknown, the unexplained, and what eventually made you want to start Euphomet?
Yeah, great question. When I was growing up, the paranormal just felt normal to myself, and I think it was just there was an acceptance of it in my family. You know, I grew up in a rural location in Washington State, and it was very common for, you know, my grandfather, who was a logger and a truck driver and worked at a mill, and, you know, people like him that were very blue collar and grounded to come back from a logging trip and report seeing Sasquatch, right? Or having rocks thrown at them from the woods, or, you know, somebody reporting of seeing a ghost, you know, sort of chasing their car on the side of some rural highway. And then, you know, an event would occur routinely in my household where, as a kid sitting watching TV or whatever, my mom would just walk over to the telephone and pick it up and start talking to my grandma before it ever rang. And vice versa, like the same thing would occur when I was with my grandma, and she would just pick up the phone, and there was my mom, and they would just talk. The phone would never have to ring for them to be able to start talking on the phone to each other. They would just know. And they would say, "Oh, it's our ESP," you know, and it was just like, well, yeah, I guess so. I guess that's just, there was no doubt that was real, because it was real.
Yeah. You know? Yeah, right. Of course.
You know, and then being a child of the 90s, and being very creative, very bored. I couldn't sleep very well as a kid. And I would just listen to the radio. And what went from listening to like sort of 90s pop jams like Montel Jordan and stuff like that, I eventually found AM radio, and I found Art Bell. And from like 1994 on, I was listening to Art Bell like almost every single night. And that you can't help but have that shape you when you're 10 years old and you're exposed to that. And he's talking about all of these wild things, and, you know, some of the leading experts and investigators at that time, like describing what they're experiencing or what they're investigating. And it's absolutely enthralling. And then you're seeing these things translated to X-Files and things of that nature. And it changed me. And so fast forward, when I was considering a career change, i.e. I hated the industry I was working in, which was the creative ad agency industry. When I was trying to figure out ways to create therapeutic situations for myself and to engage my creativity again with things that I really cared about, I thought about two things, and that was the paranormal and pro wrestling. And so before I did anything with pro wrestling, I started to dive into the paranormal space because it was something that I knew I wanted to actively create in. And I wanted to just tap into those feelings of being a little kid and being curious and open to a world beyond sales transactions and advertisements and things of that nature, you know? And so the first incarnations of that show, I just started kind of cold calling people, and you know, Brian was probably one of the first guests that I ever interviewed actually on that version of the program, and that was like 2012 or something like that, I think.
People don't need to know.
Yeah, right. This is awesome. I found Ryan's complex. Like,
oh yeah. It starts with Peter and ends with Pan. Yeah.
Swish.
Right.
Swish.
But yeah, that's how that started. And if I may, I suppose I'll include wrestling in this narrative because it was around that same time that I started to watch wrestling again after not watching it for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I was watching it is because I had Euphomet over here, and it was the thing that I was actively doing and engaging with and creating with. And I was like, okay, that's my outlet. But now I need something that feels nostalgic, that I know I won't be inspired to do anything with. So I started watching wrestling. Sure. And unfortunately, I found independent wrestling after a period of time. And I continued digging deeper and deeper and deeper. And I found companies like Progress in the United Kingdom. And I started really getting into the world that independent wrestling was building outside of the WWE. And it was too inspiring. And I was like, I immediately was like, I don't know how I'm going to do it. I got to do something in this space now. Like, and that's where DEFY started to come to fruition to me, is that it was a means to experiment and push my creativity and to build a platform around that. And, you know, when I was younger, I had a lot of experience building events for, you know, hardcore and punk bands and things of that nature. So the event space wasn't new to me. The production space wasn't new to me. I felt like I had very good like storytelling instincts, and I understood the psychology of wrestling fairly well in terms of like the building of characters. And a lot of that was actually when I was in high school. I spent a lot of time with like old veteran wrestlers from the Portland territory, like Playboy Buddy Rose and guys like that, who would come into like my small town on the Oregon coast like every month. And I would go and set up the ring, and I would sit under their learning tree about booking and promoting and stories from the road and everything else. And some of these guys were, you know, they shouldn't have even been wrestling anymore. They were way past their prime. But other guys were like, hey, no, you're still one of the smartest people in professional wrestling. And to get that perspective from some of these guys that were very successful in the territory days, right? Were just lessons that I never forgot. And in high school, it developed this obsession with doing backyard wrestling. And so I was a complete nerd for backyard wrestling in high school. And every weekend, I wasn't partying. I wasn't trying to date girls or anything like that, really. I was obsessed with writing out, filming, and producing backyard wrestling shows in secret. Like, it was me and my friends. Like, we didn't do it. Like, we would be way too uncomfortable trying to wrestle in front of people. And we were not, it wasn't good. It wasn't like watching my buddy like Matt Cross and his like backyard wrestling that like kind of took, you know, everything by storm, and they got a video game and everything. Like, they were actually like doing 450 splashes and like had kind of rings or jumping up. Like, we were just dumb shits. Like, we couldn't. But what I was learning was like, I was taking what I was learning from guys like Buddy Rose, or like Moondog Moretti, who is like Nick Wayne's grandpa, for example.
Oh, wow. And
I was applying those things to how I was writing my backyard wrestling shit. And as soon as I got out of high school, that ended. Like, we all went our separate ways. We went to college, got into music and those type of things. But those were the training grounds for just being a professional in production. Like, I'd already like put myself through a boot camp every weekend, like learning how to shoot and edit and write formats. And so that wrestling adventure was what made me a great person to work in an ad agency or to do podcasts. Like, it was really my training ground in media. And I think wrestling can be that for a lot of people. And it is for a lot of people, a medium, like a publishing medium, a creative medium that can allow them to do a lot of other things. Right. And that's how it was for me. I haven't thought about those backyard days in a very long time. So that has in my memory as a part of my narrative in this, because I also, when I talk about DEFY, I never usually actually, it's very rare. Maybe, I don't know if I've ever actually mentioned that part of it when I've like talked about DEFY before.
Cool.
I've mentioned the origin of like, I left my ad agency job. This was an outlet, all these different things. But I think I've forgotten that there were 4 years of my life during high school. It was just like, I mean, there's like I have boxes.
Sure.
Of tapes.
Yeah.
Boxes of tapes.
We triggered some memories there, Andrew.
And now I just want to see like a Sandlot type movie that's just about kids doing backyard wrestling who eventually go their separate ways as it goes. But
Get to writing.
Get writing.
Yeah, right,
well, we got you, buddy. Well, I mean, two things, Jim. Like, I was the same way when it came to UFOs. Like, I also voluntarily didn't have girlfriends and didn't date. Yeah, let's go with that.
Well,
but I was writing like phantom essays to myself about UFO cases. I wasn't handing them in anywhere. I wasn't showing anyone, but I wanted to like stretch those creative muscles and be like, oh, could I like create a story out of this Roswell UFO crash from 1947? Or what if I got abducted by aliens? What would the spaceship look like? And I would start writing these stories to myself. And then eventually I'm like, maybe I could do something with this. And then eventually that would turn into books and podcasts. And so I know that feeling of like something's lit under your tush, as it were, to like create something with something that you love. And it seems that you've done that in many different facets, whether it's the unknown or wrestling. So I guess that kind of brings us up to, and we'll talk about SPECTREVISON, I think, later. I want to get there. But Andrew, yes.
Wrestling. I'm just going to ask right now, has the no getting in the ring idea held up, or have you gotten in the ring at that point?
Great question.
Have you thrown on some tights or a nice singlet? No, nothing? Oh, come on.
There's still time.
So, I mean, maybe we'll talk about it a little bit, but like in my tenure of being in professional wrestling, I am so opposed to promoters getting involved and like being on screen and like hate it. It's so cheesy to me. Like I would feel like storylines, it's so hack. It's so crazy.
But what's wrong with showing up to an NFL draft with a neck brace on? I don't know what you're talking about. Anyways, Jim, I don't want to step on any toes. I know you've worked with some of those individuals, but
I'd tell them.
Okay, that's fair. Well, DEFY. So how did this start? Who did you work with? And what was kind of the mission going in with DEFY? From years and years of watching what works, what doesn't. Give us the origin story of DEFY.
Why DEFY?
Why DEFY?
Wish.
Yeah,
wish.
This is good. I like that. I saw what Progress in the UK were doing. I saw what PWG were doing in LA, and there was a lot of great companies at that point in time. It was kind of the indie boom, where essentially at that point in time, most of the roster of AEW and WWE were wrestling on the indies at that point in time. That I was starting to follow it, and like seeing what Ring of Honor had done. There was nothing like that in Seattle, and that's where I was living at the time.
Yeah,
and I knew that Seattle had this great ability throughout the decades to latch on to counterculture programming and events and ideas and be there for it and really run for it. And we'd seen it in other mediums, and we had seen it in wrestling, during the territory days. It was like such a powerful territory. It was so many great wrestlers coming through. And I knew that, there was a very small scene, and it was mostly sort of comedic theatrical wrestling that was happening, which was, it had a fan base, but it was like really tongue in cheek. And I would go and watch it. And it was a lot of untrained wrestlers. And then the trained wrestlers didn't have anywhere to wrestle. And it was just, it was a very strange scene at that point in time. And so when I was looking at what these other companies were doing at that time, they were sort of like labeled as super indies is what they were kind of labeled. And these were companies that, were paying attention to bringing in larger talent, making a more premium experience, something that was potentially a little more adult oriented, focusing on match styles rather than some sort of television oriented storyline. It was about fan engagement and the experience of the event, and really making people in their 20s and 30s and 40s feel comfortable to go to one of these things as a nightlife alternative, right?
Yeah.
Like, we can go see improv, stand up, or go to this DJ set, go watch this band, go drink, or we could go to pro wrestling. And how how do you make that work in a market, And coming from a background of creative direction, I felt like I knew how to make things cool. And I was like, if I could make this cool, in addition to good, I think that could translate over time.
Yeah.
And so that was a cool times good equals future business.
That equation works. Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time like in brand development for it. Like I made the logo myself, and it took me forever to get to a place where I felt very confident that it established the tone that I needed, that I required. And I, started working with Matt Farmer very early on, who is one of the preeminent wrestling historians in the world, and was an independent wrestler himself, and a really good one at that. And just a super smart, grounded guy who at the same time had intentions to start something himself that was very, very similar, if not exactly what I was trying to do. And he knew who the players were worldwide. He knew what wrestlers we could bring in to kind of like pop the scene. And we just developed instantly a chemistry because we just knew that we wanted the same thing. And, me having more experience in like sort of media and design, and him having, way more experience in wrestling, it was the perfect combination because I knew I first of all didn't want to book matches, book out finishes, like all those type of things, because I'm not a wrestler. I don't know how to do that, and I would never enter into that space. I want an expert that knows how to do that. I want a guy that's like been in there and been in those situations where the match like gets fucked up during the heat spot, and they need to like call an audible, but they want to try to make the finish as good as it is. Like, I want that guy. I've never had that experience, right? So I knew I needed a partner that was like on the booker side of things, that I could collaborate with wholeheartedly on the creative of it. And I would take, we would take care in doing crossover work with each other and developing the whole strategy and voice of the brand. But that's where it all started, I suppose. And we knew that the first event would potentially be the biggest event. Well, I'd say the most important event that we would ever throw, because it would establish us not just within Seattle, but the greater wrestling community. And it would say that these guys are serious and they know what they're doing. And so that began the pursuit of trying to establish a baby face for the company that was a local, that we could put in a lot of different situations. And then it also challenged us to find that perfect headliner that had buzz and that could draw. And what we ended up with was a main event of the current AEW World Champion Swerve Strickland versus the current WWE World Champion Cody Rhodes.
Hell yeah.
That's insane.
Hell yeah, man.
That's insane. I like
so cool
to think that was your main event at your first event ever, the current two world champions in the two biggest companies. It just blew my mind when I went back and rewatched that match. So what is that like? How did you guys even, like, when you're a new company, like, I know you're going and seeking talent and everything, like, do you hold auditions? Like, how did you reel in people like Swerve, people like Cody, like, from a business aspect, Jim, I guess? How does that all work? I've always been really curious about that side of it all. Well,
I mean, this is going to be a fun conversation, because I'm like, this is the longest I've been. I've been a little bit more detached from wrestling within the last several months, because we merged with a company, and it changed. I was able to change my positioning within the company to something that I really wanted to do. And it's also given me a little space from wrestling in general.
Nice.
And I'm about, I've been in the business now for like 8 years, going on 9. and from what I've experienced in terms of an independent promoter's perspective, I think is really unique. Just probably a lot that I could say that no one else will say. So,
okay.
Go to commercial break. Commercial break. Commercial break. Go to commercial. Stop. Commercial.
Rolling. And rolling.
Hi guys.
Will I sit up front with you, Daniel? Yes.
Okay. Ready? I know. This is the part I feel the rustiest on, actually. Is like, I forgot how we do this part. How long has it been since we recorded season 1?
It's been...
Was 2018?
It's 20... Or 19. Or no,
It's
maybe
been
it was 2018.
It's been approximately 5 years. That's incredible.
That is incredible.
Incredible. We've had a pandemic, strike.
The world has changed.
You've had 2 babies.
Yes. Yeah, 2 children.
Yeah.
Since
We both moved. We both moved.
That's right.
Yeah. We're in a new office.
There's been a lot of life.
Both of us have grown our hair, cut it. It's completely new hair on our head.
Yeah. I've cut my hair innumerable times in 5 years.
It's not even, there's none of the hair is the same as before.
I generally cut my hair like once a month, and it could,
You cut your hair a lot.
You know what's funny? I
Is it a control issue?
I don't. No. I do. Of late, I don't know that I used to as much, but I kind of have gotten used to a certain length, and then sort of maintaining that length, which is about once a month.
Yeah, I mean,
prior to that, it was not as frequent.
How frequent was it?
It could be up to 3 months. This is perfect.
Yeah.
Preamble.
I think people really want to know about this.
This is what they want to know.
Visitations Season 2, featuring Daniel Noah and Elijah Wood. All new episodes, all new guests, and all new hair. Coming soon from SPECTREVISON Radio.
Wrestling is all about money.
Yeah. Yes.
I think we could all definitely
Yeah.
agree with that. Yeah.
So when you're talking about talent and how can somebody get this guy or that guy, you pay them enough money. Wrestlers are going to go and work for that money.
Yeah.
They don't need to like you. Maybe they don't even like you. They don't have to like your town. They don't have to like the person they're working with. And oftentimes they do. Maybe they do. Maybe they don't care. But if that fee is right, it's a business, right? So it's like any other industry in that way. Like if you get commission and you're an artist and you're making an album cover and it's not a band you like, but they're paying you your fee, you're going to go do that, even if they're like a new band, right? And you're like, this band might not make it. Why do you care if you're doing it?
Right.
So that was, as a new company, it helped me having someone that really knew their shit like Farmer and had, great connections with that space and a really great reputation. And as we focused more on developing like a really stellar reputation in the field, that really makes things happen that are extremely unique, I will say.
Sure.
In terms of what the good graces that you'll receive sometimes.
Yeah.
People and developing partnerships. But yeah, in terms of like, you don't really audition wrestlers. If you're doing your job, you already know what their work is. You've already like watched tape. You're aware of what they're doing on social media. You know what matches they've done. You know what their style is. You know their weak points and their strong points. You know what kind of combinations of, opponents that they could have, like people they could work with. You maybe even know a little bit about like their like if they're a nice person to work with or not, or if they're an asshole, they're super great. And there are both. And you have all those factors, and so that comes into servicing the booking, which then in turn services the show that you're putting on, because there's a lot of different philosophies on how to book a show out. Matchmaking is one element. The overall booking of the show, though, is like an album, like those matches are like tracks on an album, and you're trying to create an experience that you can go and listen to a single, and that's great. But if you listen to the thing all together, sometimes it's even better,
Hell yeah, man. Oh, that's cool. Because you brought him up a couple times now and he seems so formative. How did you connect with Matt Farmer? How did that relationship how did you guys meet?
There's this one time I got off of work and I got into my car, and then I looked in my rearview mirror and Matt Farmer was there, and he was just staring at me, and and he didn't have pants on, and I was like, what the get out of here. And I was like, and he was like, hey, do you want let's do wrestling together. I was like, man, this business is really weird. I don't think
not that weird. That's pretty much how I pitched the podcast to Ryan.
Yeah, so that's how we started our
yeah, that lines up. That lines up actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought I was being inventive, if anything. So.
Yeah, no, you just took it from Farmer. We were someone I can't remember who, but someone was like, hey, I know who it was. I think it was there's a local wrestler who is fantastic. He's like a rad wrestler. He's even a better person. He owns a comic book shop in Tacoma called Destiny City Comics. I think he was the guy that was like, I chatted with him because I'd seen a lot of his work, because I spent like 2 years intensively going to every single local show from like Seattle to Vancouver, British Columbia. Like I just went to so many shows, and over that time I just met everybody. And it was Ethan HD who said, you need to like talk to Matt Farmer. You need to talk to Matt Farmer. He's the only guy around here that knows how to do this. And like, you need to bring him on board and you won't be disappointed. And so, we met, we exchanged like some very awkward Facebook messages. I remember now, I was like, hey, I'm thinking about starting the company. And I was like, oh, it's very, very good. I would like to engage with you about your company. I was like, well, sir, maybe we should meet. And it was a very weird interaction, but I know now why. And it's because like a lot of shitheads try to get into wrestling that have no business being in the business, and you approach them like you would some sort of person with a personality disorder, like without volatile emotion involved.
Sure. Yeah.
That will kick off, right? So that's what he was doing with me, and and then it was just we sat down. We immediately started. We started thinking about wrestlers that we wanted to use and matches we wanted to see, and we just started clicking on that way creatively right away. Yeah, and it really has developed over the years. I'm saying this now, knowing that I actually missed a call from him yesterday, and I feel bad. But like, it is one of the best. Just one of the best relationships I've had in my entire life.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
Like above, so good to hear. Yeah, above like working, creative, like whatever it is, he's like a brother to me, and I just love the guy so much. And that's sometimes uncommon in wrestling.
Sure.
Absolutely.
I was about to say that's where the stories, like the similarities about me pitching this to Ryan, differ. Is that it's that we can't. After this, we yell at each other a little bit. We go away.
Can't stand the guy.
Whenever we do this again, is what it happens. Yeah.
I mean, his weird little twin boys. Oh God.
No. Yeah, they're always touching things, and their hands are covered in mac and cheese. So because when I know you said you haven't maybe brought this up before, probably haven't mentioned this before with the high school, with the backyard wrestling. Is there something that you, as a wrestling promoter now, have realized, oh, this is what I wanted to do? Not even like, obviously, just like putting together a wrestling show in general, but is there anything specific where you're just like, oh, I had this idea when we were doing backyard wrestling, and now I can make it happen in front of my very eyes?
Interesting. I mean, I think what comes to mind first is that some of the people that I loved as wrestlers, I've got to work with since, people that we were like copying their moves or their styles or whatever are people that I've gone on to like have incredible events with or spend time with. I mean, I don't like, this is for anyone that is a fan of ECW from back in the day. That was a time period where that was my favorite company when I was in high school, and working with like Super Crazy and becoming his friend and like going to barbecues and stuff with him and and like booking him versus Tajiri in a Defy ring as like the kind of I guess like they hadn't wrestled for years and years and years. It was the first time they wrestled in a very long time. And I don't know if it was their last. I think after we did the match again, they went on to do it a few more places. But to see that at Washington Hall in Seattle in a Defy ring was like, I had to pinch myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They killed it. It was a terrific. People should go watch that somewhere. It was a Defy Dragon Spirit, I think it was what it was called. And on that same card, like Ultimo Dragon was headlining, and it's just things like that.
Oh man, that's a big one for me. Oh, yeah. I love Ultimo. Oh, that's so cool.
That's cool.
All right.
Yeah. So that's cool. Like when I was a backyard wrestler, if I could imagine as I was like copying Tajiri's Mist, in his buzzsaw.
Yeah, sure.
If I could imagine that, like, oh man, I'm gonna work with that dude. It's blow my mind.
Oh, that's amazing. So because we've talked about empathy and we've talked about the human experience and stuff like that, and I don't think this gets talked about enough. What was it like emotionally for you going through this, from your first show to maybe like hitting a show where you're like, oh my God, I'm like, because I think after we're all creatives, we've all had self-started projects. At the beginning, it's all go, 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 go. And you got to keep things alive, and then at a certain point, you get to kind of sit back and not necessarily like look at the fruits of your labor, but kind of appreciate what you've created. So have you had that moment yet? And if so, do you remember what it was and what did it feel like, in the old heart and soul?
Yeah. I can tell I get very emotional about this stuff, and
good for you, man.
I've like cried a lot, with moments of joy and also like moments of defeat. I mean, with any company, those are really hard, and you can experience a lot of like financial insecurity, and especially in entertainment and live events. There are months when you're like, "Whoa, what am I doing here? This is
right."
Not good, and that can create rifts between like friends and family, and it can get really intense. But on the other side of that, I can tell you the last time I cried,
bring it
on wrestling, and it was I had an opportunity to go to St. Louis for when Swerve won the AEW Championship.
Hey,
and
that's awesome.
Yeah, I gotta like. He's still a dude I'm very close with, and we text, and that I'm not friends. I don't text with a lot of wrestlers. But he's a guy I do, and to see where he's come from and to be a small part of that has just made I'm so proud of him, and the completion of his narrative during the same time that Defy was transitioning and Defy had merged with another company and my role was changing was a really special time. And I think that, like, I think about that, and that was emotional, and getting to, like, you know, give that dude a big hug after he came back into the backstage area, like, chip my tooth on the AEW championship belt, and I didn't even care because I was just so happy for him. And and then thinking about over this last year, Progress and DEFY were talking about merging, and to be at the Electric Ballroom in Camden Town in London, the place that inspired me to start DEFY, and having a DEFY championship match, a sold out DEFY show in that room with Kenta defending the DEFY championship, a guy who inspired me while he was on NXT at that moment.
Sure.
Like, oh my God, this, like, I'm going to learn everything about Pro Wrestling Noah. I'm going to learn all about Japanese wrestling now. Kenta was a big part of that journey for me. While he was like Hideo Itami on NXT.
Right. Yeah.
And that was also a moment I was like extremely emotional about, because look how far we've come, you know, look how far this little thing has gone. And there's a whole narrative to that. There's a whole story of overcoming odds and surviving and keeping our reputation, continuing to be good people, continuing to like treat people well and give people opportunities, and not just wrestlers, but production people. And it's one thing people don't see about independent wrestling in particular, but wrestling, is that, yeah, there's wrestlers, right? But like, there's also production people, you know, there's camera people, there's administrative folks, there's editors, and there's just photographer. There's an entire mechanism of wrestlers are just one element. And yes, they're the feature thing, but it's like saying that, yeah, all there is in a film is the actor. Right. That's a ridiculous thing to say.
Yep.
Same applies for wrestling. And so, you know, within the independent space, I feel the most joy over, I think, the opportunities that other people have gotten from being associated or being a part of DEFY. And that's like wrestlers, but that's also staff, that's referees, that's editors, that's graphic designers, that's all these people who many now are making, it's their livelihood, it's their career, you know?
Yeah.
And they're making more money than me. So it's,
but it always happened that way. Yeah.
What I love about that is it's, first of all, Jim, that's fantastic. And you got me emotional as well. So thank you. Because it's not only, there is, of course, the very selfless ideals that you were talking about giving people an opportunity to shine and relying on everybody. But that also, in a good kind of selfishness, that's how you get the best product. When you listen to everybody that's around, that's how you get the good stuff. You never know when where good ideas are going to come from, because they just kind of happen. Like, I've gotten lucky enough to direct a few short films, and whenever I walk on set, I make it clear to everybody. I'm like, listen, if you have something, gaffer, best boy, sound, I don't care. If you have something that you want to say, come talk to me. The worst thing that happens is that I can say no. You know what I mean? That's the worst thing. And I'll never be mean about it. I want to cook. We're here to create things. Like, so it's always nice to hear somebody have that kind of mentality, and that it can be applied to anything.
Yeah.
Anything. You always have to, like, if you're working with people, use those people.
Right. I mean, unfortunately, I'm the opposite. When I walk in the room, I'm like, I am God. Nobody, the script is set in stone. I'll be in my trailer. Do not talk. I'm kidding. I'm the same way. Like, if an actor comes up to me and says, hey, I think this line could be a little different, you know, right. The one side of your brain is like, you just want more dialogue, or you want a bigger monologue. But the other side of me is like, actually, no, you're the one embodying this thing I created.
Right.
Like, you should have some say in that. Like, so, you know, I'm always open to making changes or evolving a character through the eyes of the person who's going to be a part of that. Or, hey, sound guy, light guy, what did you think of that? Like, yeah, it's all of this, theater, film, wrestling, it's so collaborative. And like you said, so many people don't see beyond the wrestler of what is actually going on. And you mentioned camera people. I can't stress enough how much I appreciate the camera work in, everything from the indies up to the major leagues, as it were. How important cameramen are in all of this, and angles, and the way, a punch is thrown. If the camera is at a wrong angle, illusion broken. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So there's so much that goes into it that people just don't think about, Jim. I can't even imagine what putting together one event would be like. It's not just like, oh yeah, we got the space, rings in there, turn the camera on, let's go. Like how, like, let's say for a televised event that you guys do, like a major one. I know that you had a recent one. How much prep goes into like one of those 2-hour long major events that you guys do at DEFY? I'm interested to know that. Like, it seems like with a lot of these places, it's like go, 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 go. But how much planning goes into it? I guess very long-winded way of asking that.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting question. I mean, there's a process that happens. There's a long tail to it and a short tail. Like the long tail of it is that Farmer and I have a plan, like have general plans that go out for sometimes like 2 years or longer. And those change often. Like those are when you're talking about like the old adage of the booker, the most important thing on the pencil is the eraser kind of thing, right? Because those things do change and they're very influenceable, but you have at least like a little bit of a structure that you're working through and working to intentionally. And then between shows, there's sort of more of that like sort of creative booking intensive. And in that world, that is actually the only space within wrestling where we have zero feedback, like in our little cocoon that Farmer and I have together. It's just it's just him, it's me, that's it. No, nothing else. Like, and the equation that has helped us make decisions sometimes as fast as we need to, and or take as much time as we need to. And like having that union, the very like sort of McCartney-Lennon kind of situation has really helped. And it's actually, I account it to being sort of a sacred space in a way. And then the branches of that, though, as soon as like that element on the other layer of that is, or on the outside layer of that is when all of the feedback and information and insight and collaboration comes from that really sacred space. So that's ongoing. That's like always happening in terms of like the production elements of it, whether it is the event itself or the video. There's about, I would say 12 people that are involved in that process for DEFY. And we're creating packages, we're designing graphics, we're making motion graphics, we're developing the lower thirds. Brian Lowry, who is this incredible production person that we use, he's making truck sheets and developing the run list and all of these elements. And, it's very, some of it is very typical television production stuff. And that'll happen for sometimes months ahead of time. Other times it's oh my gosh, we're going to actually stream this. Let's get into a scramble.
Yeah.
And that's another element, depending on if it's streamed or if it's sort of pre-taped and released whenever. We will modify our production responsibilities based upon that. Like a live stream is like much more intensive in the lead up and the actual pre-production, Whereas if we did it the other way and we release it later, the post production is a lot of element. So they still kind of like encapsulate the same amount of time that we spend on it.
Yeah.
They're just flipped either way.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Sure. So now that we know how much you prepare in advance, can you think of a situation, or if you can narrow it down to just one, because I'm sure there have been many, where you have had to change or fix something on the fly, where you've been like, a wrestler gets injured, somebody can't make a show, somebody drops out, things like that. Maybe something got lost that was supposed to be shipped to a certain show. You know what I mean? Like,
The ring.
It just happened. Yeah. I mean, it's almost happened. Yeah, there has been so many over the course of time. To narrow it down is going to be difficult, but just
fair enough.
Easy. I mean, it just happened. Due to the situations with, I think, the IT hack or like whatever's happening with Delta.
All right.
This last weekend, one half the Acclaimed couldn't make it to the show, so we had to pivot day of and make sure there was a great opponent or a great partner for Anthony Bowens. And what was good is that we had oftentimes we'll have matches on the shows that we don't advertise. And one of the reasons we don't advertise them is I mean, like surprise. We love like giving some stuff that's just like, we don't need to tell you the whole thing. Like just come, you'll see these things.
Awesome.
And just trust us and we'll surprise you.
Hell yeah.
There's a great wrestler that we use named Randy Myers, and he's one of the last students of the Heart Dungeon.
Wow, cool.
Too hard and comes from
like a Tyson Kidd compatriot. Wasn't he one of the last ones too? I think.
Yeah, exactly. He's a part of that class of
yeah.
And Natalia's and Davey Boy Smith's and that group, and he. In wrestling parlance, he's an exotico, right? He's a very, sort of ecstatic character that has a lot of, let's say he promotes a sort of a fantastical sexuality. Let's put it that way. And our fans love him so much. They love him so much, and he's sort of our local weirdo hero. And so he had another match on the show, and it was and we hadn't announced it, and it was a very easy choice to slot him in and, hey, Randy, like, let's team you with Bowens, and perfect,
Yeah.
So, but we've had those situations. We've had situations where wrestlers get hurt or a flight gets canceled.
Right.
Or just no show. We've had a few of those before, which are never fun. But
wow.
So it's always about like working with those limits. I mean, every show there's something.
Sure.
Every show there is something, and it's about learning how to. You have to know that it's going to happen and just be okay with it almost. And just know it's part of the process that like this card that we have mapped out and that we think is great. Very rarely is that the card that actually ends up happening.
Right. Yeah. Well, to kind of play off of that too, Jim, there's so much exciting stuff going on right now. Andrew and I always talk about how, like, things like New Japan working with AEW, or like, TNA wrestlers going over to NXT. Like, this wasn't how it used to be. Like, it was so, forgive the pun, like territorial, and like none shall they meet, in so many words. So in today's landscape, where you are seeing a lot of like ping-ponging all over the place, what does that mean to you as like the owner of an independent wrestling company, to see things like whatever, Joe Hendry, let's say, the big talk of the town right now, like going over to NXT and like actually winning a match and then coming back to TNA, or we're seeing it all over. It's pretty cool, pretty exciting. But what do you, as a wrestling promoter and owner of a company, think about where we are right now with the indies and their relationship with kind of the bigger companies?
For me, it's cool that it's happening in the television landscape. I think it's good for fans. I think it's probably, there could be ways that it's good for those companies. We shall see. But DEFY and a few other companies on the indies have been doing it for years.
Yeah.
Like before the term Forbidden Door, we were doing that shit.
Right.
We had opportunities to have, even at points in time, WWE talent, like being in DEFY, wrestling independent wrestlers or wrestlers of other companies, right? Like, Pete Dunne defending the WWE UK Championship at Washington Hall against Brody King, who was about to go to Ring of Honor, or New Japan guys. And listen, DEFY has been very lucky to be partners with a lot of different companies over the years and continue those relationships. We actually have, we are the owners of a tremendous amount of Visa talent, or Mexican, Japanese, UK talent. So there are guys on WWE and AEW and and TNA that my name's on their Visa or whatever.
Right.
So for us, for me personally, I would think that I feel happy to have been a good example for the hype that can be generated by creating Forbidden Door scenarios.
Yeah.
We have been doing them for a very long time.
Baby. I love it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Jim, we're going to start to wrap things up, but we wanted to give you a little bit of time to tell us about your new project with SPECTREVISON. I know it's a crazy winding story of like how you got hooked up with the guys over there, and all that. So yeah, can you tell us a little about what you're doing over there with SPECTREVISON and the folks over there, Elijah Wood and all those guys?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I became friends with those guys by starting to work with Daniel Noah on, I had him featured on Euphomet to tell his story. He's an experiencer. He is wildly, passionately obsessed with high strangeness and everything therein. And, we just are thick as thieves. And they brought me into the fold to manage a podcast network through SPECTREVISON. And this podcast network is called SPECTREVISON Radio. And it is where we hope that artful explorations of the arts and the esoterics sort of merge, right? Sure. And that programming that is all sort of very high concept, that touches on art, such as filmmaking, music, and the like, meet the high strangeness. And so that's where Daniel and Elijah show Visitations, and paired with Euphomet is a perfect example of those worlds. And we're creating an environment which we hope feels like a weird community radio station, broadcasting from some unknown locale, and creating community. So there's a lot of like interesting crossover projects that we're currently working on, and interesting creators. I just spent a week in New York City producing a show with Mitch Horowitz, the esteemed occult scholar, which we'll be releasing later this year. It's called Extraordinary Evidence, ESP is Real. And it is will be a highly cinematic exploration. Cool. And by cinema, I mean that of the ears. And with an incredible original score. And those are the type of projects that we're circling right now, and that we're developing. And then it's allowed me to like get back out on the road.
Yeah.
Last week is New York. Now I'm back in Southern California, where I've moved. And in a few weeks it'll be Germany, and then it'll be Las Vegas, and then it'll be Florida, and then there's a trip to Japan at some point in time as well, I think. And it's a dream it's a dream come true. And, you know, at the same time, I'm still, you know, helping creatively with DEFY, you know, and working with Farmer, making sure those guys have everything they need. And that, you know, as a larger group, which is, you know, DEFY in progress, that we're working towards some goalposts and doing some incredible stuff. The last 2 shows I haven't been at, and those are the, I've really never, there's only been 3 shows that I haven't been to in the history of DEFY all these years. And the last 2 were 2 of those. So that's been weird, but I'm so glad that we're on YouTube and that I can see YouTube and watch it live. So it's
keep an eye on everyone. Yeah, over at DEFY. It's like letting your kids be home alone for the first time.
Yeah. But I'm so proud of them. I'm so proud of the team. You know, everybody has come together, and they're so professional. They're so good at what they do. And I just could not be happier of like the DEFY in progress team and what they're doing.
And you have a lot to be proud of. You cultivated that environment. You got them to that point where they can do it on their own. You know, that's awesome. Like, that's awesome, dude. Congratulations.
Thank you so
Real
much.
men. What is that saying? Real men make their luck.
Don't eat quiche. Oh yeah, that one. Yes. Sorry.
Billy Zane. I'm quoting Billy Zane right there.
Why wouldn't you?
What?
Yeah.
That's the Phantom, baby.
I was literally about to say, I put the Phantom on to fall asleep to the other night. The Phantom has one of my favorite openings ever, which is they literally go like, there was a boy and he was on a boat and that boat got attacked and he got off the boat and he ended up on an island and the island people turned him into the Phantom. Like, that's what they do in the first like 3 minutes of the movie, because they're like, look, we don't have time. I don't have time for this. We want to get you to Treat Williams so you can go on with the rest of the movie.
Guys, this comic has been around since the 1920s. You know. It's like, why do we have to have the Batman origin story every damn time? Come on.
Right.
Wow. Way to go off the tracks at the end there. Jim, buddy, it has been such an honor, a pleasure to see your face again for those watching this on YouTube.
Yeah, thank you.
To hear your voice, man. And like I said, you have so much to be proud of, so much to look forward to. And if we can even just be, you know, on the sideline rooting you on, man, I feel like that's all we could ever ask for. Where can we find everything? DEFY, SPECTREVISON. Yeah, give us the handles if you don't.
Oh my gosh, it's so weird to blend these 2 worlds. It's great. I love it. It's like maybe the most personal thing ever. So thank you for allowing me to like blend these 2 worlds. You can find everything DEFYWrestling.com. You can find everything for the SPECTREVISON Radio at SPECTREVISONRadio.com. You can find everything for Euphomet at Euphomet.com. You can find me on social at Euphomet across all social. That will get you essentially everywhere.
Amazing.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Andrew, you want to close us out, buddy?
Sure. As always, Somewhere Ring Pod or Some Ring Pod on Instagram, Twitter, somewhere. Look, go on the social medias and type in Somewhere in the Ring and we will come up. Go to patreon.com/Somewhere in the Ring. As always, I have a short horror film that I wrote and directed called Pay the Tithe that you can watch on Vimeo. And if you like the unknown and the unexplored and the supernatural, I think you will like that movie. So please check that out. Listen to Somewhere in the Skies so you can get more of Ryan and maybe hear me on occasion as well. And thank you everybody for joining us. Jim, at the end of the episode, we like to have people ring the bell to get us out of the ring. Whatever that means to you, if you wouldn't mind, please send us home.
Dig deep into that creative process.
Okay. This is me looking to the side of the stage where the guy that's supposed to be ringing the bell is not ringing the bell. I'm just looking at him. I'm like, dude, like, there's 3. It's 3 count. 3 count, please. And me running over and ringing the bell as fast as I can.
Yeah. Perfect.
I love that. Jim, dude,
5 stars.
Thank you so much for joining us. Sincerely.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
This has been Somewhere in the Ring. Thank you for listening. Subscribe wherever you get your pods, and be sure to rate and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever possible. We'll see you again soon, Somewhere in the Ring.
This has been a production of LIONSGATE Sound. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever possible. Thank you for listening.